We're on a mission from God.
And now for something completely different.
Let's get ready to rumble! Yeah, baby, yeah!
This is Pastor Jolly John Lekumsky coming to you from New Athens, Illinois.
And this is Pastor Matt Youngblood Clark coming to you from Ascension Lutheran Church in a beautiful South St. Louis.
And you have tuned into Wrestling with the Basics. And we're doing kind of a series of Old Testament stories. You did a really, really tough one last week about Abraham and the sacrifice of his son Isaac. Any last words you want to share with us, bring back to our memory from last week's episode, Matt?
Well, thanks, John. Yeah, I think for me, we looked at that account through the lens of God as provider. That's a consistent theme that God sees. That's literally what it says in the Hebrew is, when Isaac asks his dad, "Dad, where's the sacrifice?" And Abraham says, God will see to it. God sees. God will provide the sacrifice. And just that reminder for us and for our listeners that that's who God is. God is still a God who sees today. He sees us. He knows us. He sees to it for us, provides for us. That most wonderful way of providing was his own son, right? And especially this Lent, that's what we focus on. Christ's sacrifice on the cross, that sacrifice once for all out of God's great love for us, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. But then also that God provides for all of our needs. God sees to it no matter what those needs are. So, whether we're someone who maybe is, entering retirement and wondering, are we going to have enough money for this thing called retirement or not? Or maybe it's someone who's a first-time parent and wondering, oh my goodness, how am I going to raise this child? Or whether it's someone who's lost a loved one to death recently and there's just a great void there. I think in all of those instances, we can say the Lord will provide. The Lord will see to it. The Lord sees you. The Lord will provide for you. That's his promise. I don't always know how, right? But we know that he will, because again, that's what he promises. The one who gave up his son for us, how will he not, along with him, graciously give us all things, as Paul writes in Romans chapter 8.
And I think that's why it was really, because I did not actually realize that, which shows that even old guys can learn stuff, that the word provide there in that story of Abraham actually is the Lord sees.
Yeah.
Because I thought what's cool is we don't see. In fact, that's the very definition of faith, isn't it?
Oh, that's good.
Faith is hope of the things that are unseen. So Abraham didn't see how God was going to see to it. He didn't know. We don't know how. Well, but see, we do. We do because we have what God has told us. Now, we don't see it, but he's told us that the same thing's going to happen to us. There's going to be a resurrection from the dead for us, for our loved ones, eternal life. And the cool thing is, while we can't see it, we can just believe it. We know, as you've indicated, that God does see to it. He has seen it. He is seeing it. He is going to see that it's done just the way he said. So,
thanks.
So,
the only other thing
go ahead. Yeah.
The only other thing I would add to that is just, so God provides for us, right? But he also provides through us sometimes. God sees us, right? But who do we see in our world? Because you're right, John. We can't see God, and how He's specifically going to provide for us in a specific circumstance. But boy, we can see our neighbor though, and when they're in need, we can see to it that they're provided for, that they're loved. God can work through us to provide for them. So just to have our eyes open to that, who do we see, and how can God work through us to see to it that they're cared for, that they know who Jesus is.
Anyway, so I think that's a great distinction. So we as far as faith is, we don't see things. We don't know how God's going to work it out. Yeah. We know He will. That's His promise. But you're right. There are things we can see, and those are things we can act on, and those are things we can do, which of course is loving and caring for the people that are around us. So that's a nice distinction, Matt. Yeah. It's a nice distinction. I want to deal with another story it's kind of difficult. In fact, a lot of the Old Testament stories are difficult because what happens in them is so foreign and so strange. And you wonder, well, how does this have any application to our life? And yet I think the entirety of the Old Testament as application to our life. In fact, I think that the key things about Christianity are the things that are going on in the story of Abraham. And now we want to deal a little bit with the story of Moses. Because I think there are three key things in Christianity. There is sin, there is faith, as we've been talking about it, and as you just mentioned, actually, this works really good. It's almost like we planned this. Love, that's a key thing in Christianity too. So thanks for reminding us. We got to remember that's part of it as well. And the story I want to illustrate those three things. Sin, faith, and love is the story of Moses as a little baby.
Okay.
So let's start with a little background, though, to the story of Moses and a little baby. Of course, if you're talking about sin, we have probably one of the most wicked, evil villains that you'll find anywhere in the Bible when it comes to the story of Moses. And who is that? Who is that,
So
man?
you have Pharaoh, the king of Egypt.
Yeah. And of course, many commentators point out that we don't even know the name. God doesn't even bother to tell us the name of this evil, wicked villain. But I'm thinking about that judgment scene where Jesus says, I don't even know you, right? People are knocking on the door, let us, and he says, I don't even know you. But let me share with you some of the evil, wicked things that makes him such a terrible, terrible villain. If you could read for me Exodus 1, verses 13 through 14, talking about Pharaoh here.
I do like that, though, John. His name's not even worth recording in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And you think of all the people, the sinners, and people's names are recorded, right? But not this guy, not this Pharaoh, right? Okay. Exodus, so it says, so they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves and made their lives bitter with hard service and mortar and brick and all kinds of work in the field. And all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves.
So there you go. That's what a terrible, horrible, incredibly evil, wicked person this Pharaoh was, that he made them work ruthlessly. Well, wait a second, Matt. Didn't we do that for about 100 years in our country? As I recall my history lessons, yeah, we did that for about 100 years to black people, didn't we? We made them ruthlessly slaves. And you know what's really incredibly sad is that for most of it, Christians didn't even say a thing about it. It was just like, okay. In fact, there were Christians that were actually saying, oh, no, this is what the Bible teaches. This is actually the will of God that people would be enslaved. So maybe Pharaoh really wasn't as wicked as what I thought, or at least not unusually wicked. Well, okay, wait a second. There's something else he did, though, that I think is really incredibly cruel. Do you have a comment about that, Matt?
Well, no, I know, John. Yeah, not any more wicked than any of us, right, John? Yeah, okay,
well,
fair
yeah,
enough.
You're kind of getting my drift here.
Okay, yeah.
Let me give you one more example.
Picking up what you're laying down.
If you want to give an example of how incredibly wicked and evil this man was, read Exodus 1, verse 22.
Yeah. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live.
So again, Matt, we can look at that and say, oh, what an incredible evil. But we look at our country again, and what do we see, Matt?
Well, I mean, we see abortion, for instance, right? And we see, in other countries too, sometimes even based upon a child's sex, male, female, one might be wanted and one might not be wanted so much.
So I was doing some look at the statistics because I was just wondering, because there is so much talk about abortion, and I must admit I was shocked. I looked at the statistics from the CDC, and the Center of Disease Control, and I point that out because there's no political motivation here. You know what I'm saying? This is not some political organization trying to prove a point. It's just the government statistics.
The hard numbers.
Yeah. 2 years ago, I couldn't believe this. 1 out of 5 births was aborted, Matt.
Wow.
I had no idea that the numbers were that dramatic. And I'm thinking at least Herod gave him a chance, right? If you had a smart mother and she could hide the baby, well, then the baby might survive. We kill them in the womb. In fact, the mothers are killing them.
Yeah.
So you already caught my drift. It does us no good to look for villains in the Old Testament. We are not looking so we can say, well, thank God I'm not like Pharaoh. Okay. No, when Christians talk about sin, we're talking about something that impacts the whole world and impacts us personally as well. And I have a strong suspicion, Matt, the reason you and I have not been given great power, okay, is because God knows, I can't imagine what John and Matt would do if they had the power of a Pharaoh. Who knows what incredible evil things they would do. But yeah, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So it's something we all wrestle with. And in fact, can I give you just two more examples of what I think we have in common with Pharaoh? Would that be okay?
Oh yeah, go right ahead.
All right. So it's not like Pharaoh is like your classic movie villain. He's sitting in his castle or his pyramid, or I don't know. Where did Pharaoh sit, Matt? Do you have any idea?
I don't think they're in the pyramids.
I know.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, right. His palace. He's on his throne in his palace there along the Nile.
Okay. Yeah. So he's not.
Haven't you watched the Ten Commandments, John?
Yeah, that's true. There you go. Yul Brynner. Yeah, that's right. They're all bald too. They're all bald. Maybe that's why they were so angry. I can't get a decent haircut. but so it's not like they're twiddling their thumbs saying, "Oh, how can I be cruel to the Israelites?" He actually has a reason for doing what he's doing. Again, the Bible's really explicit about this. If you read Exodus 1, again, verses 9 through 10.
Yeah. He said to his people, "Behold, the people of Israel are too many, too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and overturn the land." So
it's fear. It's fear that motivates him. And it occurred to me, yeah, maybe that's how the Bible is constantly saying, fear not, because I think so much evil and so much wickedness goes on because we're frightened. We're frightened of things. I suspect that's why Putin invaded Ukraine, because he saw that Ukraine was becoming more and more Western, that there were actually overtures that maybe they would join us as an ally, that they'd become part of NATO. And he said, I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to have an enemy on my doorstep. And so that's why he invaded the Ukraine. We've got all this stuff going on in Israel. And you wonder, why is all this brutality going on in the Middle East? And it's because Jews are frightened of the Muslims, and Muslims are frightened of the Jews. And, you've been working with immigrants. Do they talk? Do they feel fear, or do they sense that people are frightened of them? Or does any of that come in your discussions with the immigrants that you have in your church?
Yeah. Oh, well, sure. So coming as refugees in particular, at Ascension, and I think, I think just perhaps there's a fear of the unfamiliar. Here is someone who is, in St. Louis, who doesn't speak the same language, have the same culture. Who are they? What are they up to? Why are they here? What's their motivations? Yeah, I think fear and suspicion can certainly, be in the hearts and minds of people, just because it's unfamiliar, right?
And so again, I think, and I'll be honest, if I'm walking in downtown St. Louis and I would see, a couple or three black teenagers coming my way, I must admit that I'm uncomfortable with that. But again, not for any reason, not that anyone has ever harmed me. And again, please understand, I'm not saying that if I was attacked that I don't have a right to defend myself. I'm not saying that as a country we don't have a right to call our armed forces together and defend ourselves when we're attacked. Certainly we should defend our families if they are attacked. But of course, the thing you got to remember is, what does Jesus say we're supposed to do to our enemies? Yeah,
love them, pray for them. Yep.
Because, see, somehow we want them to understand we don't want to harm anybody. We don't intend evil for anybody. No, what we want to do is we want to love and we want to care for people. And again, I think that's why the Bible constantly says, fear not, because this fear is a source of so much wickedness and evil and mistreatment in our world. Here's the other thing I think we have in common with Pharaoh. I think Pharaoh really thought he was doing what was right. I mean, he is the leader of the Egyptians. If you know your history, the Egyptians have been invaded by foreigners in the past. In fact, this present Pharaoh probably was part of the new regime that had driven out a lot of these foreigners. So he's just doing what he thinks he needs to do to protect his Egyptian people. And so I'm going to ask our listeners to do something rather difficult here, but I'm going to ask them when they get done listening to this show, if they would just take a few moments in prayer and think about something that they're doing, that they're absolutely certain is the right moral thing to do. They have no doubt in their minds that this is the right, righteous, moral thing to do, and to just think and pray to God, is there some sin in this? Because I have found that usually the most sinful things are the things that at the time I thought were the most right and correct things I could do. And I am pretty well convinced that if the Bible is true and it says our righteous deeds are like filthy rags in His sight, I am pretty convinced that even our most holy acts, there's probably going to be an element of sin that we should recognize and we should repent of.
Yeah.
I don't know, any thoughts about that?
Well, thanks, John.
Matt?
Well, I think this part of it is, and I think we've talked about this on Wrestling the Basis before, is reading the Bible like a loser. Do you remember talking about that? This idea that sometimes we come at the Bible and, we're the ones who identify with the good guys in the Bible.
Yeah,
We're the
yeah.
Moseses. We're the Aarons. We're the Davids. And wait a second. Maybe sometimes we look a little more like the Pharaohs and the Herods and the tax collectors and the Pharisees. So for us to read Scripture, not with pride, but with humility, and to realize, no, we're in need of forgiveness. We are no holier than and no less deserving of damnation than even Pharaoh. Yeah, and that's a good practice.
And the irony is we could see ourselves as the Moseses and the Davids, because in the very next story, Moses kills a man, and David, of course, commits adultery and kills
Fair
a man.
enough.
Yeah. So if you want to see him that way, we can see ourselves as that. I'll give a little personal confession here. Man, I thought I was really, really a good pastor, one of the best pastors there ever was when I was a pastor. And every day I'd realize, man, I am so proud. I'm so egotistical, and I hated that. But it's just something that to this day, I wrestle with. So dear people, sin, you're going to find it in the Old Testament. You're going to find it in today. But don't see it as the thing. Don't see the speck in your brother's eye. We should probably become really aware of the log that we have in our own eye, as Jesus says. So that's sin. So here's the second thing, though, you're going to find in the story of Moses. Faith, which if you think about it, if it is a world where there are so many things to be frightened of, there is so much evil and wicked, there are so many pharaohs out there, and then, of course, we have to be frightened of our own sinful flesh, that there would be any faith at all is a remarkable miracle. But if you could read for me, let's go to the second chapter of Exodus. Read just the verse 1 and 2 of Exodus chapter 2.
Okay. It says, "Now a man from the house of Levi went and took his wife, a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months."
Okay, so there you go. We have the birth of Moses. And you know what, Matt? I am willing to bet, because you are a very, very knowledgeable guy. You know your Bible forwards and backwards. You wouldn't happen to know of a New Testament passage that comments on that, do you?
Let's see here. Well, let's see. As a matter of fact, Hebrews 11, John.
I knew you'd be able to come up with something, Matt. Yeah. What's it say in Hebrews 11?
By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw that the child was beautiful, and they were not afraid of the king's edict.
And you'll notice, by the way, the key thing is they're not what?
They were not afraid.
Yeah. If fear is the result of sin, faith is the elimination of fear. And I'm thinking, wow, that is an act of faith, isn't it? Because I'm thinking, if I were a Jewish mother, a Jewish parent, I would despair. If I had a baby boy, I think, oh, well, it's all over with. This mighty, powerful Pharaoh has made his edict. My child is going to die. But instead, nope, she believes, she trusts that God's going to protect him somehow, just like you talked about, the God who sees, the God who provides. I'm not sure how he's going to do it, but she keeps him keeps him hidden for a while. Of course, here's the problem now. He's 3 months old, and so he's making too much noise. We can't keep him hidden anymore. And so what does she do? You want to continue that story there in Exodus 2, starting with verse 3?
Yeah. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made with bulrushes, dabbed it with bitumen and pitch, and she put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank.
And keep on reading. We'll just go ahead and...
And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant women, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, it was
let's just stop it right there, because
Yeah.
I want to build a suspense here. So here's the plan. Since I can't hide him in my house anymore. If an Egyptian soldier would come by right away, they'd hear the noise. They'd know I had a baby. So I'm gonna kind of hide him in plain sight. I'll put him in the Nile in a basket that's waterproof. Who's gonna look for a baby in the bulrushes of the Nile? It seems like a great plan. I've got my daughter there watching over him. They're not looking for little Hebrew girls. They're looking for Hebrew mothers. So at least he'll be safe there. And then, of course, it seems like the plan falls apart because someone does hear the baby cry, and it is the daughter of Pharaoh. So what do you think the daughter of Pharaoh is going to do when she finds a little Hebrew boy?
Yeah, well, you would think, right? You would expect that she's going to obey the Pharaoh's edict or dad's edict, right, and get rid of the kid.
So I'm thinking, oh, my plan is all gone to pot. It's all over with. My son's going to die. So now read what actually happened there with verse 6. Read it all the way to verse 6 through verse 10.
Yeah, when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because she said, "I drew him out of the water."
So you think if God had come to Moses' mother and said, "Look, here, I've got this plan. We're actually going to have Pharaoh take care of your son."
Yeah,
okay,
incredible.
He'll-
Yeah, I know. Pay you to take care of your own son.
Yeah, exactly. And so you don't need to worry. Everything's going to be fine. And of course, well, how in the world is that going to happen? But that, of course, is the whole point of faith. Faith is not about what we do. It's about this belief that somehow, because God loves us and cares for us, he will do the impossible. He will see to it that we are provided for, like you talked about last week. And it will be in some way that we just probably could not have imagined, that we couldn't have dreamt. And that is what faith is. But that brings us then to the final element here that we find in the Old Testament and in our present Christianity, and that is love. Because actually we do know why Pharaoh's daughter did what she did. In fact, it's right there in the text. If you could read for me again, Exodus chapter 2, verse 6. Why did she disobey her dad?
Yeah,
Why?
When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children."
So she has pity. She has love. She thinks this is an abandoned child, and even though it is a Hebrew child, she's going to, in her love and her compassion, she's going to take that child in and care for it. And, of course, everything else that you described there with Moses' mother now actually being the nursemaid, as it were, of her own child. Now, here's the thing that we cannot say for sure. How in the world is it that this daughter of Pharaoh would go against her father, would act in love and compassion towards a Hebrew child? I don't know. You want to venture a guess, Matt? Because we don't have an explicit we know she did it out of pity, but we don't know where the pity came from.
Yeah, this is completely unexpected, right?
Yeah.
Breaking the Pharaoh's law, her own dad's law, and maybe at risk of herself, her own safety.
Yeah.
But, it's just, I think the Lord is behind this, that God is providing and even softening the heart of Pharaoh's daughter to have pity, to have compassion for this little baby boy. That's all I got, John, is that God is at work, and he works through Pharaoh's daughter in this circumstance, which is pretty cool. God can work through anyone to accomplish his will.
Which is another reason it occurs to me that we shouldn't be frightened of other people, because we may be surprised at the people that we think are evil and wicked and that God in turn will use. Just like the Apostle Paul. It must have been hard for the Christians to listen to him, to welcome him, knowing what he'd done. And yet, God can use, God really does incredible, miraculous things. My speculation would be that she must have known about the Hebrew God. She must have known something about the Hebrew faith, because how is it that she could look at the child and immediately know that it was a Hebrew child? She must have known something about the Hebrew gods. And let me tell you this, if you got to choose between gods, you don't want to choose the Egyptian gods, because you go back and you study the Egyptian gods, they are all things that you should be frightened of. That's their whole thing. They are gods of fear. And if you don't make your sacrifice to them, well, you better be frightened, because they will punish you. Whereas the God of the Hebrew God, well, he's the God, and this is what he calls himself. He's merciful, he's gracious, he's slow to anger, he's abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. And so I just think somehow she must have come to know that Hebrew God, and out of that knowledge of the God of faithfulness and God of love, in fact, abounding in love, she then responded in kind. Because I know that's how it works for us. Not perfectly, of course, because we're still all a bunch of sinners, but as Christians we do. As you mentioned at the very beginning of the episode, we do see the people around us, and we have pity and compassion, and we respond with love. So there you go, Matt. Even in the Old Testament, those basics are there: sin, faith, and love. And I've got one more thing I want to share, and if you don't mind, I'll bring it back next week, and then we'll go on to whatever our new material is. Would that be all right?
Yeah, sounds good, John. Great text. Yeah,
because one of the things I was taught in the seminary is you got to find Jesus. Every time you go to the Bible, you need to find Jesus. Well, that's why when I was a pastor, I always preached the Gospels. Not like you. I didn't choose the Old Testament lesson to preach on, because Jesus is easy to find in the Gospels.
The Gospels,
right there.
Yeah, you bet.
Sometimes it's harder to find him. But I think this story is also all about Jesus. And with your permission, we'll begin next week's episode, and then we'll go on for wherever the Lord leads us. This has been Wrestling with the Basics.
Showing support for KFUO is now easier than ever. You can sport a KFUO shirt, swag, or even socks by visiting our online store. Go to kfuo.org/store and order high-quality KFUO-branded merch. You no longer need to wait for our annual share-a-thon for a chance to show your KFUO spirit. Visually share and wear this ministry out in the world by checking out our selection. Every purchase helps to support our proclamation of Christ for you, anytime, anywhere. Go to kfuo.org/store.